Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
About 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day, Romaine Bostick here alongside Caroline Hyde. Taylor Riggs counting you down to the closing bell. And here to take us beyond the bell, our global simulcast team joining us today, Carol Massar, bringing together our Bloomberg Television, Radio, and YouTube audiences. 4184 on the S&P 500. Right now, Carol, just shy of that record high.
Yeah, just shy. As someone said to me earlier, Dave Wilson said, it's kind of the calm before the storm. We have so many earnings coming our way this week, especially, Caroline, some of those big tech names. We'll get Tesla today, but everybody's kind of waiting to see what they have to say.
Big tech names, you've got Facebook, Apple. It's interesting that the Nasdaq still managing to hold on to its record high as we speak, currently up 0.8%. And notable, Taylor, that we've seen outperformance of big tech on the same day time as you see outperformance of the small caps. Is this reopening? Is this not? The narrative gets a bit lost.
It was interesting because the transportation index, Romaine, was also at a record high, but now you've started to see that turn lower along with the Dow. So you're sort of getting that market cap weighted, some of the equal weighted index falling a little bit. But then, of course, you get notes from Vince Signorella saying, of course, talking about some of that sell-off in the small cap names that we were watching just about 25, 30 minutes ago or so, and some of the big uptick that we saw in the futures as well.
Yeah, and again, a lot of this really kind of boils down to this idea of where you think we are in this economic cycle, and I guess to a larger extent into the market cycle. A lot of folks say we're at the beginning, and if we are at the beginning, then maybe valuations don't look so bad. But if we're somewhere at that midpoint, then I don't know, maybe you do get a little worried. You start to see these earnings come in and the margins come in, they look good, but then you look at the price on some of these stocks, the price multiples, I should say, and that gives you a little bit of the shakes here. All right, let's take a look here at the S&P 500, getting the closing bell, 4186. It's going to take a minute for that to settle out. Keep in mind the all-time high, to be precise, is 4,185.47. So right now, we're just above that. The NASDAQ composite going to finish the day higher by about 0.9%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closing below 34,000, down right now about 0.2% here. And the outperformer of the day was the Russell 2000, 2297 roughly here. That would be good for about a 1.15% gain.
Yeah, I love that, Romaine, that those small caps continue to outperform. Let's not also forget, and we got to roll this into everything we think about. We're going to have a Fed meeting this week, and we'll see what they have to say about the economic outlook, Taylor, and what that might mean for yields going forward and how that might impact the equity trade.
Before the Fed, we're going to get the economic outlook from the companies, real-time data of what they are seeing on the ground. And as we take a look at some of the sector level, that's really where we begin. Some of the semi equipment makers, they're up 1.4%, followed by some of the auto and the banks, which are up about 1 to 2% or so. So it really has been all about these chip makers. Skyworks up anywhere from 1 to 3.5% on AMD as well. So that's some of the sectors, of course, in the green. We migrate downward some of the sectors in the red, and it really is sort of those defensive ones that are in the red. I'm thinking the household products, for example, are off 1.25%. Some of the food staples off about 1.2%. I'm looking at the likes of Kimberly-Clark, for example, just really having some concerns about, Carol, some of that margin and some of those inflationary inputs.
Yeah, exactly. We'll talk about inflationary. Check out the share price of Casper today. Man, that stock was up about 27% here, up 40% so far in 2021. They were upgraded to outperform from neutral over at Wedbush, liking what they got from the company. So that was one of the big outperformers. Otis Worldwide, one of your older economy type of companies too. One of the gainers in today's session, reporting earnings per share for the first quarter that beat the average analyst estimate. And we did see shares rallying to an all-time high in today's session. A stock that we talked about, Romaine, last week. I'm talking about SVB Financial. They're the holding company for Silicon Valley Bank. That's one of our gainers today. Analysts have been really upping the price target on that. So we're continuing to see some momentum this week. And last, I got to mention Reviva Pharmaceutical. Some upbeat news, phase 2 clinical trials for their schizophrenia treatment. It's a microcap, a NASDAQ name, but that was, check it out, more than 100% higher in today's session.
Yeah, and to the downside, when we talk about sort of that pull-through effect here in the COVID pandemic, Albertsons have been a beneficiary of that. Sales were up about 12% in the most recent fiscal year. It did not provide a guidance for the next fiscal quarter. That has investors a little rattled here. The shares down 5%. Etsy down here on a downgrade over at KeyBank, saying that growth there could also slow. Remember, Etsy was also a big beneficiary of the pandemic. Snap, which of course rallied 7% on Friday, of course, after those earnings, giving back about 2% here. No real extra news here. And Starbucks down. We are awaiting their earnings tomorrow night. And of course, this is on a day where coffee price is hitting a 3-year high. Say it with me, everyone. Arabica
Arabica.
Arabica. Romaine, I say commodities. Perfect setup because commodities, soft commodities, on fire today. We're going cross-asset for our radio, our TV, our YouTube audiences. And I've seen metals on a tear and I'm seeing soft commodities on a tear. Zinc up 2.25%, but we've seen significant improvement in the likes of wheat, corn, soy. Once again, what we all live off, what we all eat is continuing to ravage higher as we see concerns about the weather. We also see oil, though, on the downside, off by about 0.7% as the oil market sort of worries a little bit more about the COVID numbers in parts of the emerging markets, particularly in India, a key driver of demand for oil. So we do see Brent crude off by 0.7%. I move that into the story on foreign currencies because well, it's the commodity-related foreign currency pairs that do particularly well. Canadian dollar up 0.6%. Aussie dollar, a bet on copper, which of course near a decade high. Aussie dollar up 0.8%. We also see the Kiwi doing well, up 0.5%. And we've got that risk-on tenor. We've got the yen down by 0.2% as we don't need a haven. And indeed, that not needing a haven in Europe showed up because European stock markets did well and the bond market sold off a little bit.
Unbelievable, Caroline. Just like you said, risk on, which is so much of why the small caps, that reflationary trade was the big outperformer today because yields, they try to climb higher. We're up not an inch, maybe 1 basis point across the curve. And Carol, this really comes as we had a 2- and 5-year auction today, about $60 billion. That belly of the curve has been really soft. These, of course, were about average stats. The 2-year was a little bit weaker, but you are getting a little bit of demand finally coming back into what was really big concerns about the softness in that belly of the curve.
Don't you guys all kind of feel like you're just waiting for the party to begin? I'm waiting for Tesla earnings. It's probably going to be a little bit more of a wait here, but this is going to be one of the big earnings, and we're going to find out how they're doing in China specifically. They are anticipating a record quarter, so we'll see what they have to say about supply constraints within their supply chain. The interesting thing, Romaine, what I want to know about Tesla is there's a lot more competition, especially in that Chinese market.
There's a lot more competition. The other thing I think that's interesting about this is what the delivery forecast is going to look like. Remember, the company was kind of hitting at about 750,000 deliveries for the year, but when you look at street estimates, you're like at around 800 to as much as 860 here. So it'll be interesting to see how that gets reconciled there, whether the street is a little bit too bullish, but you never quite know with Tesla. You never quite know with Elon Musk. And is he hosting? What is he hosting?
That's what we all want to know
May
about.
8th.
Live from New York.
Saturday Night Live.
Who's he with? Isn't he with, I forget, who's the musical guest?
I don't know. Is it like
Sorry,
Grimes?
Miley Cyrus. Miley Cyrus for her, I think, 6th time. But I mean, we'll see how he performs on May 8th. Whether it's a Seth Rogen repeat, we will see. But what we are going to note is also how fast Tesla has been. Remember, up 8-fold last year, up only 3% this year. Meanwhile, though, we're also looking at not just what's happening in terms of numbers. It'll be interesting that Lyft is just saying it will turn adjusted profit by the third quarter. So that company agreeing to sell its self-driving unit in a $550 million deal. So some breaking news coming from potentially a robo-taxi competitor, because that's really the future of where Tesla goes, Taylor. We are seeing that Lyft is agreeing to sell its self-driving unit for $550 million.
Yeah, I want to be really careful here not to speculate, but the pressure to profitability has never been greater on some of these companies like Uber, like Lyft, Romaine. And so you start to wonder if they focus back on that core business. I believe you've seen Uber start to hint signs of that as well, as you really want to see the pressure from investors to be adjusted EBITDA positive.
And didn't we hear something similar from Uber as well, essentially kind of offloading that? I mean, look, I mean, it's a huge cost. I mean, obviously it could pay off down the road, but why not pass that cost off to someone else or at least share it with someone else?
Checking out Lyft in the after hours, stocks up about 4.25%. So investors seem to at least like what they're hearing. I also do wonder, guys, I'm going to focus a little bit. I know we have lots of earnings, but we do have to think about that Fed meeting. It's going to be, I think, the third Fed meeting of the year. It's a 2-day meeting. But Taylor, I do think about what they might say about the balance sheet specifically, or whether or not they give any indications about when we could see higher rates. Because at this point, we're talking about a year and a half from now or so.
Yes, we are. And I want to bring you some comments, of course, that we're getting from BlackRock, saying that the markets are still underestimating the Fed to achieve that long-term inflationary target in the medium term. And they think that the path higher for yields, it is higher. So, Caroline, you are really seeing some companies like BlackRock come out and say they might have to signal this sooner than markets participate.
And Tesla earnings are crossing the wire right now. That 1Q adjusted EPS number, 93 cents. That's above the street estimate, consensus estimates of 80 cents a share here. That appears to be a beat here, at least on the main number. But of course, we have to look a little bit closer into that delivery estimate, as well as, of course, those cash flow numbers, Taylor. Not quite seeing them yet, but Tesla does say it expects to achieve 50% annual growth in vehicle deliveries.
Yeah,
Caroline.
interesting. I've just downloaded the press release. I'm on page 4. We're going to be going through all the numbers, Caroline, the horse race here. But so far, like we said, the revenue up 74% year over year. They're really talking about substantial growth in their deliveries, of course, when the average selling prices declined by 13% year over year for the Model S and the X. And then, of course, those deliveries reducing some of the first quarter, of course, due to some of the product updates that they have. But you migrate forward to the profitability, and they are really looking at a 5.7% operating margin.
Just 5.7%, because this is we're also looking at a company that continues to need to show its profitability with free cash flow as well. All important, $293 million. The estimate had been for a negative cash flow. It's interesting, of course, Carol, how much this is benefiting off other cars needing to get their carbon credits, trying to get their, of course, overall perspective on offsetting some of their still combustion engines that they're selling thick and fast. But this is a company that's still managing to rally after hours, as we see that Tesla's on track to start production from Berlin factory in 2021.
Yeah, listen, I think there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to Tesla specifically. You are listening to Tesla earnings on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg TV, and YouTube. You know, keep in mind the president has also talked about EV credits, once again, EV rebates specifically, which could give a boost to Tesla going forward. And I mean, I think what we need to find out is, especially certainly when we get into the earnings call, you know, they're boosting production when it comes to Austin, Texas specifically, but we want to know kind of about the outlook and whether or not they are continuing to maintain some share, because they have been losing a little bit of market share in the United States, Romaine.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the production numbers right now, we kind of knew this, 180,338 to be precise deliveries, 184,800. Of course, they give those monthly updates, so we sort of knew that. I guess you're going to extrapolate from the headline about the potential growth, 50% annual growth in vehicle deliveries, where that sort of gets you here on a full year basis. That would still put you roughly in line with what the street was expecting, even a little short if my math is correct here.
And of course, we always want to focus on fundamentals, but this is a company that is investing some of their cash in Bitcoin, and indeed they comment on it. They see that we do have some positive year-over-year impacts from the sale of Bitcoin, and that was a reason why some of their quarter-end cash and cash equivalents decreased to about $17 billion, mainly because they had a net cash outflow, all due to cryptocurrency purchases. Caroline.
And of course, many saying that the rebound that we saw in Bitcoin since the weekend was in large part because Elon Musk tweeted. Once again, of course he does that, but he said, what does the future hodl? Which hodl being that technical term that the crypto markets like in terms of holding your crypto. But he was sort of signifying, of course, the ongoing interest he and perhaps his company have in cryptocurrencies, Carol.
Yeah, absolutely. Stock little change here in the after hours, but certainly we'll continue to follow on that earnings call. All right, that's going to do it for our cross-platform coverage here on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg TV, and on YouTube. Catch us again, same place, same time tomorrow.